Ah, shit, the internet relates to real life. Wow, it's almost like that's the thesis for our podcast.
Welcome to Wild True, the podcast of your wildest memes.
We're here to dissect the entire internet, something normal to want and possible to achieve. I'm science fiction author, not your attorney, and top 1% Tumblr user, Isabel J.
And I'm Amanda Silberling, an internet culture reporter and Yik Yak survivor, coming at you with an existential question for the very online. Is anonymity a good or a bad thing? But we're not anonymous, we're here to be fully perceived, because anyone could be famous on the internet, so why not us?
God, I have not heard the name Yik Yak in perhaps like half a decade.
God, I wish that were me.
Why? Why are you on Yik Yak in 2024? Does it still exist?
I'm not on Yik Yak. I just did a lot of research on Yik Yak for our good, wholesome American podcast.
Our good Christian podcast that was definitely not going to contain a lot of pornography in the next episode.
Yeah, our good Christian podcast that is definitely not co-hosted by a Jew.
Exactly. I think we can call ourselves a Christian podcast if I'm technically Catholic, because, you know, that
I don't know how any of that works. That's
no, it's like holy water. It's like holy water. If you put a little bit of holy water into other water, it becomes holy water. This is also the same as with hot dog water. If you put some hot dog water into normal water, it will turn into hot dog water because it is contaminated. Does this answer your questions?
This does answer my question. I wanted to talk about the trade-offs of anonymity on the internet. I think, like, at the start, you can say, all right, well, in some ways, anonymity can be used for, like, harassment and bullying. In other ways, like, maybe it is good if everything we do on the internet is not connected to our selves and our identities.
Yeah, like, I'm a big proponent of anonymity on the... God, I'm gonna mispronounce anonymity every single time on this podcast. I cannot stress this enough. But I'm a big proponent of it for my purposes specifically because I really like being able to shitpost with nominally not my human name attached because my human name needs to have words that are good and not words that are bad.
That really is it's so hard for you being an author and a shitposter.
It is genuinely so hard for me, and nobody appreciates that. Do you know how hard it is for me, guy who writes a very serious story about hole, and then wants to make a lot of hole jokes? But you can't do that, because then it makes it seem like you're, like, not being serious about your serious hole story. So then you have to make them all on Tumblr. Does this help?
Thankfully, Tumblr is alive and well so that you can make your hole jokes. But, yeah, so... I have written, like, a school book report where I'm like, let me set the scene of the opening context of where we are in anonymity.
Fuck yeah, read me your book report. Can I give you a grade on this at the end?
Okay.
Can I give you a grade on your book report?
Yes, I think that'd be great. So, the US government cannot agree on anything. Even now, we cannot agree on who should be president. However, this is a good time to say that, I guess this will come out 2 weeks from now, but right now there's a lot of Kamala brat memes, and I'm loving it.
You exist in the context of all that came before you and whatever.
Yeah, this is why we can talk about the Kamala brat memes, even though it's going to be like 2 weeks later, because we exist in the context of all that has came before us, unburdened by what might have been, ?
We did not just fall out of the coconut tree. We have to move on. Read your book report.
God. Okay. So, the US government cannot agree on anything except for this. Social media might be bad. Do you think social media is bad?
I think social media is a sin.
Okay,
and we should all
cool.
stop doing it.
Okay, cool.
We should all log off. I'm dead serious. This is not a bit.
Yeah. From my perspective, like, reporting on this... I feel like we've seen a lot of these discussions really ramp up ever since in 2021 when the Facebook whistleblower Frances Haugen released a bunch of documents from Facebook, which the most memorable one is, like, she leaked to the Wall Street Journal these research PowerPoints that Instagram was using internally that showed how Instagram has a negative impact on teenage girls and how the company didn't act on making that better. Before we move on, I do just want to do another aside to say that something underreported about the Haugen documents is that the actual documents, like, she was taking pictures of her computer screen with her phone because, like, you don't want to take a screenshot on your work computer because that's how you're gonna get, like, flagged as a whistleblower. But so, like, this whole trove of documents where there's like thousands of them, like it's way too much to even go through. Like I didn't even attempt it because I was like, let's leave it to the publications that actually have like 10 reporters covering Facebook instead of just like me bopping around. But so it's all like the outline of her taking these photos reflected back onto the screen. And I find it fascinating as an art object.
That's good, actually. I feel like that's the sort of thing that if you put a little, like, plaque with, like, a little, like, art blurb, you could put that in gallery.
So, back to the serious part, like, these documents did have a really big impact. Like, this is a quote from a Facebook slideshow from spring 2020, a time that also nothing bad happened. 32% of teen girls said that when they felt bad about their bodies, Instagram made them feel worse. And another quote from 2019 in the internal slideshows was, "We make body image issues worse for 1 in 3 teen girls."
That's a lot of teen girls.
As formerly a teen girl, yeah, I get it.
Did you like being a teen girl? I feel like I did not enjoy being a teen girl. But it was it would have been so much worse if social media had been prevalent the way that it is right now with, like, you use your name for everything and everybody's on every platform.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess in a way, I don't know how different it would be. Because, like, I was on all the platforms, basically. I was also on Tumblr semi-anonymously. I mean, I do think there was value to that, where I think being a teenager sucks, but also I was able to, like, be on Tumblr where I could talk to other people that weren't from my school, and I could, like, kind of portray my identity how I wanted it to be portrayed, rather than like these people have known me since I was like 7 and have these preconceived notions about who I am.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I really never spent that much time being anonymous on the internet other than like lurking and also like going on Omegle.
Well, when did you start like using Tumblr seriously? Because you still are a top 1% Tumblr user.
I was lurking like crazy between like 12 and 18, but I had like 30 followers, and they were mostly like people I knew in real life. So It was like very much like I was consuming a lot of social media and like weird fandom stuff online and posting fan fiction and stuff under an assumed name and things like that, but like not a ton. And it was only when I was like 17, 18, like 18 or 19, that I started really like talking to people on the internet. And so it's weird for me because like making friends with people on the internet who ended up like being people I'm like actually friends with was very much like an adult life phenomenon for me, or like a late college to now phenomenon. So I feel like that's the opposite of what happens to most people, but insert shrug emoji here.
I think even when we were around that age, like in high school, we had to watch a video about cyberbullying, and we had like assemblies about cyberbullying. But I do think it's gotten significantly worse for a lot of reasons. Like, generative AI exists. We've already seen there are high schools where like people are being harassed via generative AI porn being made of them. This is bad. Because of all these issues and the worsening of it and the Frances Haugen of it all, there's been this like bipartisan crusade in the US government to pass some sort of legislation to hold social media platforms accountable. But the problem is that the people that are trying to hold these platforms accountable don't understand how the internet works at all. We've seen things like when Mark Zuckerberg was testifying before Congress, and then there was a senator that was like, "How does Facebook make money if you're not charging money? Booyah, gotcha." And then Mark Zuckerberg said, "We sell ads." Which it's like, God, I don't want to hand it to Mark Zuckerberg, but you gotta hand it to him. That was kind of funny.
God.
Yeah, there was also, like, Richard Blumenthal, the Democratic senator from Connecticut, asking a Facebook trust and safety professional, like, directly after these Frances Haugen leaks was when he famously said, "Will you commit to deleting Finsta?"
Okay.
And then this woman had to explain, like, Finsta is not actually a product that we make. This refers to, like, teenagers using Instagram and making anonymous accounts of their own accord, which they call Finstas. And then just another good one was in these recent discussions about banning TikTok and whether or not TikTok is a national security threat, blah, blah, blah. A senator asked Shou Chu, the CEO of TikTok, if TikTok connects to your home Wi-Fi network. And he was like, I mean, if you connect it to the home Wi-Fi network,
it's like,
then
that's
yeah.
a cute decision. Okay.
He was like, yeah, I mean, I guess. Like, point being, like, these are the people that are in charge of passing legislation to make the internet safer, and they aren't thinking through a lot of the ways in which this can happen and the ways in which it can go wrong because they don't know how the internet works. And that is related to the issue of anonymity, good or bad to me, because a lot of the legislation they're proposing would make anonymity nearly impossible because they're like, oh, well, we can hold people accountable for what they do on the internet if we verify their age with government documents to go on websites.
Hey, this seems like a bad idea.
It is a bad idea, but more on that later. Back to, like, when I'm talking about anonymous apps and, like, bullying and that sort of thing, what are we talking about? Pretty much, like, as long as the internet has existed, people have been saying that they are not who they are. Like, you could be on, like, CompuServe and be like, yes, I'm an 18-year-old girl from Hawaii, and then you're, like, a 13-year-old boy in New Jersey.
What's that quote? On the internet, nobody knows that you're a dog.
Exactly, yeah. And, like, there was Omegle, and then, oh man, even in researching this, I unearthed memories from my brain that I did not realize were still there. Do you remember Formspring?
Vaguely, wow.
Yeah.
Jesus.
I couldn't remember what it was called, and I was like, oh, is it Ask FM? But that was, like, later. But Formspring was, like, you make a profile, and then people can anonymously send you messages, which I never made one. This is in middle school. I never made one because I was, like, terrified of what people would say to me, and I was not emotionally mature enough to handle that. Still to this day, like, I would not allow that to happen to me.
See, that's funny because I have anonymous, like, questions turned on my Tumblr for, like, the last 10 years, and people will just ask me shit.
I feel like the culture is different on Tumblr, though, where I feel like when people are asking you anonymous questions on Tumblr, it might just be because, like, they're shy and they like your writing and they're afraid of you, like, perceiving them.
No, sometimes people will send some freak shit.
Oh, well, that sucks.
People use Tumblr's anonymous questions function for bullying and for, like, trying to, like, create little traps for the other person to, like, say something unwoke, quote unquote.
Yeah.
Or sometimes they just want to talk to you, and all of this is good. Or they just want to tell you a story. I keep it on because I think it's interesting, and mostly people don't harass me, so.
That's because you have a much thicker skin than me. I had a friend in middle school who had Formspring, and someone asked her about drugs, and she said that she lit incense, and I thought that was a drug, and then I cried because I was like, oh no, my friend is doing drugs.
Wait, you cried over it? Why did you cry over it?
Because I thought my friend was doing drugs, and we were, like, 12, and I was like, oh no.
This is a very, like, 12-year-old thing to happen.
And this is why 12-year-olds shouldn't be on the internet, probably. But even then, like, fast forward to college, Yik Yak had a moment in college.
I do remember Yik Yak being, like, big. It's precisely at the moment I was, like, 18. And by the time I had graduated college at 22, it was simply over. We simply did not care anymore.
Yeah. And so I want to talk about these anonymous school-based social apps because I think that they are central to these debates about, like, is anonymity good or bad for society? And I think we're seeing that expressed in, like, very different ways compared to, like, there are some apps now that are trying to position this sort of Yik Yak model as positive, and then, like, oh, this is good for mental health, but then also it's like, you can see how this could quickly
You
go
can
south.
see how this is bad for mental health. Okay.
Yeah.
What is Yik Yak for everyone who was not 18 when we were 18?
God, I wish that were me. Yik Yak is kind of like Reddit, but you're in one specific, like, channel based on your geographic location. And everybody is anonymous, and you can upvote and downvote posts. And it was just kind of a shit show. And I think for us, because we went to college at a place that was adjacent to another college, we got posts from like many different schools, and there was some inter-school fighting on there, I remember. What do you remember from Yik Yak?
Oh, this one's stupid. I posted like first week of freshman year, why don't they call Penn Engineering? And then people responded, they do call it that. And then I learned something about the world.
Damn, L. I don't know. It was a shit show, and there was like a yak thing on it. I don't even know what a yak is. I just know it's like a moose. When Yik Yak was part of our lives, I was not a tech reporter, so I did not know any of this, but I have now researched Yik Yak, and hoo-wee.
Okay.
So Yik Yak was founded in 2013, so notably a couple years before we were in college. How much venture capital do you think it raised?
I don't think this is valuable. Maybe like 20 million?
73.4 million at a $400 million valuation.
How are they gonna monetize? This is stupid. That's a stupid amount of money.
Yes.
This is a stupid service, and that's a stupid amount of money. Okay, now that I've said this, we can move on. Okay.
This is part of the ongoing WoW true thesis that venture capital makes no sense and company valuations make no sense, and we shouldn't think about them. 4 years after it was founded, in 2017, after raising $73.4 million, the company shut down, and Square bought its engineers for $1 million.
Okay.
This is very much the vibes of, like, Yahoo buying Tumblr for $1.1 billion and then sold it for $3 million. I want to read you 2 short paragraphs from a TechCrunch article, which I'm not self-promoing because this was way before I worked there, but they were reporting on this, so thanks.
Sure, Hemi.
In 2015, Yik Yak had to admit to users that they were only masked from each other, not police officers or other authorities with a warrant. And then in 2016, security researchers with NYU, led by computer scientist and Professor Keith Ross, found other ways to hack users' personally identifiable information out of Yik Yak. Around the same time, their CTO bailed. All the while, cyberbullies and unsavory content drove down the app experience for others. By the end of 2016, user downloads had declined 76% versus the same period in 2015. As TechCrunch reported then, the company began laying off most of its employees. What?
Well, no, this one actually makes sense to me. If people think that they're not actually anonymous, and this is the main draw of this app is being anonymous, they will stop using the app. And also, like, my feeling about Yik Yak was that, like, Yik Yak did not provide more than 2 days of entertainment.
Yeah. When people on Yik Yak were anonymous, it made them behave badly, and then when they found out that they weren't as anonymous as they thought, it made them not want to use the app anymore, which that is a strike against anonymity on the internet and how it makes people act.
I don't have anything funny to say there because you're objectively correct.
What's crazy is Yik Yak made a comeback.
Why is it back, and how is it back? Because, first of all, I haven't heard of it being back, so I'm kind of like, whoa, where did this come from?
In August 2021, which this was at the time when I was reporting on tech, so I remember this more clearly, Yik Yak just, like, randomly resurfaced, and then we were like, who's running it? Like, is this the old Yik Yak team? Or is this, like, new people that are doing copyright infringement or something? And, like, I wasn't the one writing about it, so I probably just kind of was like, well, back to my own thing. Have good luck figuring out that one, whoever was writing about it. So I didn't know, and I believe that when we were reporting on that originally, we didn't know who was running it, and we still don't know who's running it.
That narratively satisfies me.
It's kismet. So I tried looking for this on Wikipedia, and instead I found that in 2022, a student gained access to app data from Yik Yak and was able to pinpoint the locations of Yik Yak users down to 10 feet. and
okay.
then potentially, like, figure out who they were. I'm just surprised that it happened again. Like,
I'm not.
There was another Yik Yak.
I'm not that surprised, because I think, like, once people run out of ideas, they go back to the previous ideas and see what can be, like, scraped up. And the other thing about, like, apps like Yik Yak that are, like, kind of being used mainly by students feel similar to me, like, how kids' shows can run forever because a new demographic ages into them while the new demographic ages out. And the Yik Yak has been gone for long enough that people don't have an association of it being uncool or whatever.
That's the thing about apps geared towards college kids, is that after 4 years, no one remembers you existed. It's also really easy for them to inflate downloads because they, like, give out cookies if you download their app.
I don't have anything funny to say about that either. I just remember getting things to download apps and being like, yeah, in retrospect, that was weird. That was weird that was how that worked.
I was talking to, like, an older tech guy at one point, and he was like, isn't that brilliant that, like, they go on college campuses and they, like, give out donuts and then people download the app? And I'm like, that's not brilliant. That's just a thing that happens. Especially, like, we both went to Penn, which is a school that is famous for having a bunch of startup bros, and you would, like, walk down the main throughway of campus and just be, like, bombarded with people trying to tell you about their startup.
I want to believe Penn is still like this, but it's probably all AI startups now.
Oh, no.
I've been trying to get people to start an AI startup with me so we can grift some VC money. I'm, like, mostly not serious about this one, but if anyone wants to, I would love to run some grifts. Speaking of grifts, let's talk about our Patreon now. Sorry.
No, we were about to do the mid-roll. Oh, hello. I didn't see you there. Welcome to the mid-roll, a thing that we are doing now, and we haven't named it, but we don't want to force it. We're going to let it happen, but if you have any genius ideas of what our mid-roll should be called, or if it shouldn't have a name at all because we don't need to name everything, let us know. We are on Instagram and Twitter as @WowofTruePod. You might have noticed that things are slightly different in this episode than the past, and that is because we're excited to announce that we've officially joined Multitude. Multitude is an independent podcast collective, which you might recognize that name either because you already listen to their shows or because we've had Multitude founders Amanda McLaughlin and Eric Silver on Wow of True so many times, including when I am not here and then Amanda pretends to be me because we have the same name and it's normal, and that happened on the podcast before. So this is really exciting because we've been fans of Multitude since before we even started this podcast. Like, when we started this podcast, I was like, oh, I know who has resources for people starting podcasts. It's Multitude, the podcast collective that I am a fan of. And now we're part of it, which is cool and full circle and nice. So what does this mean for you, the listener? This is a good thing. This means we're part of a creative community that's helping us make Wow of True more consistent and higher quality and more sustainable for us to keep going for the foreseeable future. We're also editing our Patreon tiers a little bit, which if you're already subscribed, don't worry, we're gonna let you be. But we wanted to let you know about one of our new offerings for patrons, which is a monthly book club podcast. You can listen to a podcast of Isabel telling me about how she read the Elon Musk book, and I will be tortured and incur permanent psychic damage, and that sounds like a good use of your money, and it goes toward helping us keep the podcast afloat. So, like, great news all around, except for me personally, because I have to hear about the Elon Musk book. So that's patreon.com/wowoftrue. Please take joy in my suffering. Finally, we wanted to tell you about a fellow Multitude podcast that we think you'll enjoy, and that is Join the Party, which is an actual play podcast with tangible worlds, genre-pushing storytelling, and collaborators who make each other laugh each week. Join the Party welcomes everyone to the table, whether you're a longtime player or if you've never touched a role-playing game before. Their current campaign is a pirate story set in a world of plant and bug folk, and you can also marathon their completed stories, which include the campaign, a campaign that takes place at a camp, so it's the campaign. Very clever word play here, which is a Monster of the Week game set in a weird summer camp. There's also Campaign 2, which is a modern superhero story, which I love Campaign 2. I think it is delightful. That's my personal favorite. And Campaign 1 is a high fantasy story. So, cool. That was our mid-roll. Let's get back to the show. So what is the current fate of Yik Yak? It has been acquired by an app called SideChat, which is like the new big thing, at least on Penn's campus. Like, I am on campus sometimes because I'm a cool alumni who gets asked to speak on panels in which you're like, hello, I'm a cool alumni, and now I'm going to talk to you. And I'm very cool.
Yes, because you have to say that you're very cool, which makes you very cool.
Yes. And like, in researching all of this, I just find it alarming how so little has changed, both in the sense of like Yik Yak exists again under SideChat, and also that just the way the internet impacts us has been very visible for decades. So I mentioned Formspring earlier because I was reading about Formspring, and there's an article that was ran in the New York Times from 2010, and this is a quote from a parent of a middle school student. I wish I could just erase it, but all of her friends are online, and so much of their social interaction is online that I don't think I could just take away her internet access. But I do think this whole online social media thing is a huge experiment on our children. Interesting.
Man, I mean, like, she's, like, not wrong. Like, that's right.
Yeah, I think this is what's difficult because there's a lot of ways in which I think social media made my teenagerhood worse, but also ways in which it made it better.
Yeah, because, I mean, it's like a double-edged sword, right? Like, you get to meet more people in contexts that are outside of your high school, or you get to meet your high school friends in more contexts. These are all, like, do you know what I mean? Like, this is all, like, a good thing or a bad thing, depending on how you relate to other people around you, which you don't fully get to control because all interactions with other people are you and the other person.
All right, so one app that I'm really interested in right now is Fizz, which is a social media startup that I've been covering since they launched. I was like the first journalist to write about them, basically, aside from the Stanford Daily, because they were from Stanford, which shout out to the Stanford Daily, like student journalism, hell yeah. Speaking of student journalism, remember when we were in college and there was an anonymous gossip column in our student magazine?
Yo, in retrospect, crazy that existed.
I know.
Like, we just accepted that.
I didn't accept it. I was like, hey guys, what if we didn't do that? And they were like, but it gets the most traffic. And then I was like, cool, I'm gonna like not be part of this magazine anymore because I feel bad.
Do you think like part of it is just that like humans are gonna create some sort of anonymous way to talk shit about other people no matter what platform? Like, I bet like in caveman times you had people being like, you didn't hear from me, but I don't know.
Oh my god.
Grug tripped and fell when hunting the mammoth the other day. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I'm just saying.
Imagine writing on like the wall in a cave, like, Greg is very bad at skinning a mammoth, pass it on.
Right underneath, Grug was here.
So basically, like, I've been covering Fizz since very, very early. I've been talking with their founders for years, and they seem very genuine in their desire to build an app that helps connect kids at colleges. And so these were two Stanford students who they graduated high school in 2020, which means they also started college in 2020. And like, that sucks because you're like, cool, I got into Stanford and I've been looking forward to this and now I can't go. So the founders created this app that is basically Yik Yak, but they were trying to bill it from the perspective of this is an app that is going to help people feel less alone because they're going to be able to express themselves and not have consequences for like talking about the loneliness that comes with being a college student to begin with, let alone a college student in fall 2020. Like, are you kidding? That's terrible, and I'm so glad that we were not in college in 2020. Shout out to those people that were. I'm sorry, that sucks.
Bro, I was in fucking law school in 2020.
Oh, true, right. I forget that some people have advanced degrees and I don't. This app took off. It started out just at Stanford and now has expanded to 240 college campuses and 60 high schools. Yeah, it's the exact same shit, but the way they're marketing it is, like, so different. Like, the way they talk about it is they're like, oh, you know, like, people post polls that are like, how old were you when you lost your virginity? And then you find out that, like, a lot of your classmates are actually, like, more similar to you than you think. Because I think that is a lot of anxieties that, like, college kids have, where you're like, oh no, everyone is doing or not doing something, and I am the only one doing or not doing that. Or if someone's like, damn, that chemistry test was super hard, and then in person everyone's like, oh yeah, that test was fine. But then on Fizz, you're like, oh, I wasn't the only one who struggled with it, and people portray themselves as being like, you have all your shit together because you're a Stanford freshman and you're full of yourself, but also you still struggle because despite being a Stanford freshman, you're still 18 fucking years old and you have problems.
I see that you feel very normal about college kids. Sorry. I'm just roasting you on this one while you're very earnestly trying to tell me about, like, the dangers of anonymity and apps that are, like... What I think is interesting about all of these apps, though, is that, like, they say that they're anonymous, but it's really, like... This is different from Omegle, or it's different from, like, being on, like, an IRC chat or some shit like that, where it's, like, you are talking to people you know are in the same area as you and who you can presume are students because of XYZ reason. You know the, like, genre of person you're talking to, and you are trying to maybe have real-life interactions or talk about things from real life, which feels different to me, like, qualitatively than, like, being on Reddit.
Do you want to see what's on Fizz? Oh, see, this is good. Fizz is actually good because the first post is someone saying that a Cybertruck is ugly.
That's true. I love it, like, and everybody listening at home, take off the square that says we talked about Elon Musk.
But yeah, so that's what the kids are talking about on Fizz, apparently, so the kids are all right. They think Cybertrucks are ugly. But, like, for as much as the founders try to portray this as, oh, we are helping students feel less alone, we are helping them connect with each other, they also just opened up a marketplace where they're trying to, like, undercut Facebook Marketplace and eBay and Craigslist and stuff because Gen Z doesn't use any of those things, which is very clever, but also they're not taking a cut of sales yet. Also, like, part of Fizz's business situation is that they have this guy, Rakesh Mehta, who joined and is, like, 40 years older than the two founders that are the Stanford students. And he's a VC guy who is now the CEO. And so, like, he knows what he's doing within the VC world, but that also means that they are sticking to this very Silicon Valley playbook of growth is more important than making money, and we're just going to keep raising VC until we are, like, physically forced to make money, and then they're probably going to lay off, like, half their staff in 5 years.
Not to be, like, talking about adult things on our podcast, but that feels like on our podcast about college apps today. But that feels like a strategy made for a world in which interest rates are lower, and not for one in 2024.
Yeah, what's also really funny and, like, the most stereotypically Stanford thing about this is that the way that this guy met the founders was that his daughter is a Stanford student, and she went to a party, and at the party, she met Teddy Solomon, who is one of the co-founders of Fizz, and he talked to her about the app, and she was like, oh shit, this guy's the next Mark Zuckerberg. And then she goes home, and it's like 2 a.m., and her dad is waiting up for her, and is like, where the fuck is my daughter? And then she comes in, and she's like, she's not sorry about being home late. She's just like, Dad, I met the next Mark Zuckerberg. And that's how he got introduced to them.
This is such a, like, I don't like Stanford. Okay, let's move on. Like, what is the point of all of this, Amanda? We gotta get to the conclusion of your 5-paragraph essay.
So as much as they're like, this is combating loneliness, it started rolling out to high schools, and this one school in Vermont, forgive me for this cringe millennial reference. This is the cringiest reference I'll ever make on WoW if true. But you know that scene in Mean Girls where like the burn book gets photocopied and spread everywhere?
Yes.
And then everyone is seeing these things like made out with a hot dog and stuff like that. And they're like, I can't believe you told someone I made out with a hot dog and all that. That's basically what happened at this high school, where things just went rogue and everyone was just attacking everybody. And it got so out of hand that Fizz voluntarily shut down the community at that high school because the administrators were like, please, we are dying here, shut down this app. So they're no longer active in that high school, but I think it just goes to show that it's like, even with the best intentions, tech still gets used for really bad reasons. And I do feel like they are trying. They have like 4,000 moderators, but they're also volunteer moderators, which I feel you gotta pay people, because their idea is like, well, you have to use college students to moderate their own communities because those people understand the references in those communities. So if someone is like, I hate insert name here, and then the students can be like, no, they're not talking about how they hate Harrison, they're talking about how they hate the dorm Harrison. But also like maybe pay them. But they're also using like ChatGPT based products for content moderation, which...
Okay, so there's a lot of issues that like may exist. Got it. Okay.
There's issues that may exist that I do earnestly believe that the founders are trying to solve, but they're really, really difficult problems, and that's why like Facebook has all the money it could possibly have in the world, and Facebook is still a shit show. Like, any social media company, no matter what you do, is going to be a shit show. No one has figured out content moderation because no one has figured out, like, governance in the world. Like, no one knows how to make everyone behave in ways that are not antisocial.
Yeah, what I think is really interesting is that, like, every time there's a new social media app or some new platform, people seem really confident about their ability to solve the problems that no other social media app has been able to solve. Or like even when like Elon Musk bought Twitter, he was like, yeah, we can solve this. And then he was like, oh no, we can't solve this. And it's like, I don't know, like maybe the problem with the social media apps is that people are on them. Have we considered that? Have we considered taking the people off the social media apps?
I have another tangent, I'm so sorry, but there's this app, Butterflies, that was founded by a former Snapchat engineer, and it is social media, except you're just making an AI, and the AIs are all interacting with each other.
What? Why aren't we doing the episode about that? What the fuck is that?
I don't know, because I see so many horrors in my job that I forget about all the horrors, and then... There's simply too many horrors.
Send me a link to that. Jesus fucking Christ. Okay, we have to finish this episode.
No, but on that app, there was a Nazi. Like, someone made an account of a Nazi, and I talked to the Nazi, and I was like, how do you feel about Hitler? And the Nazi was like, he's a complicated man. And I was like, no, he killed my family.
Your job is weird. I think the internet should be shut down.
Yeah. Like, the point I'm trying to make here, as we think about the question, is anonymity good or bad? I think that this lineage of anonymous college and high school apps points to no, but as we've already discussed, we both grew up with semi-anonymous Tumblr accounts. Like, you've met some of your best friends on Tumblr. I have met those friends, and I think they're delightful. I think you can easily make an argument that when people feel lonely in the real world, they seek out online connections that make them feel more seen, which I think that's also the point of fandom, is like, you love this weird thing that none of your real life friends are into, and they don't want to hear you talk about it for the 20th time. So then you go online and you talk to people that are also like, yes, let's talk about that absurd fan theory, and like, is that a legitimate theory? If we zoom out beyond the confines of high school and college kids bullying each other and or bonding over like super hulock or whatever they were doing, anonymity is a really powerful political tool. The Electronic Frontier Foundation, which is a nonprofit working on digital liberties issues, has a whole page on their website about like, this is why we need to protect anonymity. They say, quote, whistleblowers report news that companies and governments would prefer to suppress. Human rights workers struggle against repressive governments. Parents try to create a safe way for children to explore. Victims of domestic violence attempt to rebuild their lives where abusers cannot follow. Instead of using their true names to communicate, these people choose to speak using pseudonyms or anonymously. For these individuals and the organizations that support them, secure anonymity is critical. It may literally save lives. I think that this poses the question of, is anonymity really being threatened in this country? Or am I just talking about high school administrators in Vermont being like, shut down this app? Yes, anonymity is actually being threatened, which is why I think it's useful to talk through these issues. Circling back to government bad at internet, we're seeing this in various internet safety bills, which are being proposed very frequently right now since there's such pressure for legislators to take action on help all the kids are depressed and Facebook is bad, which is true. But a lot of these bills are well-intentioned in that they're trying to do things like, hey, maybe like children shouldn't be able to go on the internet and find like hardcore porn, which yeah, I agree with that. But a lot of the ways in which this is accomplished is by making people verify their IDs to access certain websites. And that means, like, adults. Like, in order to keep children safe, adults need to be verifying their age as well. And this is why now in Mississippi, Utah, Virginia, Louisiana, Montana, North Carolina, and Texas, there is now legislation that to access porn sites, you need to use your government ID and like verify it through a government ID based verifier thing. Like in Louisiana, they were using LA Wallet, which is a digital driver's license thing run by the government. And listen, it's a slippery slope for someone to be like, I'm gonna watch porn, here's my ID, government.
I feel like we're conflating a lot of different types with one another. Do you know what I mean? Because like I feel like the anonymous ability to access pornography on the internet is different from the anonymous ability to shitpost about your classmates and or find people in real life to hook up with off of these anonymous apps.
Yes, but I think that to the government, it's all the same.
But like, what's interesting to me is like, why should it all be treated the same?
I don't think it should. Because
okay.
I would say as a whole, I am net negative on anonymous social apps. I think that while they can be good intentioned, as in the example of Fizz, they still can be used for bad, also as in the example of Fizz. And I don't know, like, I was afraid to have a Formspring in middle school, and I would still be afraid to have a Formspring. But the thing about being a semi-public figure on the internet is that people tell you what they think about you anyway.
Can't escape.
Can't escape. Like Hades, the video game. I also think another type of anonymity to consider is anonymity in the creator space. Like, think about Iron Mouse, the VTuber. Like, she doesn't have to reveal who she is, except that she has said that she is chronically ill, which makes it hard for her to, like, move about and whatnot, which is why being a VTuber has been really, like, good for her, because it's a way that she can engage with the outside world, but then not be, like, worried about what she looks like and whatnot. And there's also, like, Dream, the Minecraft streamer.
God, Dream face reveal. Let's go.
He started getting bullied more when he did a face reveal.
Yeah.
But also he was such an aggressively normal looking guy. Like, he's, like, not that affects whether he should be bullied or not, but it's like, something I've learned on the internet, being a woman on the internet, is that it doesn't matter what you look like. Men that want to harass you will still make fun of what you look like, even if you're, like, the most beautiful woman of all time.
Mm-hmm. No, but I think, like, one of the more interesting experiences I had with anonymity on the internet was, like, when I was posting fan fiction in my early 20s, and also, like, actually, like, when I started posting, I've probably brought this up on a pod before, but the assumption on the internet that everyone you're talking to is white American.
Yeah.
Unless you bring up any other identifying factors, and that the other thing is that in certain spaces you're assumed to be a woman if you're there, and other spaces you're assumed to be a man. Like, you know, like, I feel like if you post on Reddit, people assume you're a dude. But if you post on Tumblr, everyone assumes you're a girl. What does this say about the way that, like, online spaces are curated? Probably something interesting, but also probably something bad.
This is also making me realize that I follow a lot of sports meme accounts, and I don't know, like, I think of them as men in my head, but I don't have any evidence that points to that. And meanwhile, I am a woman who is also shitposting about the Philadelphia Phillies.
Right. So, like, kind of an interesting way that, like, gender comes across in anonymous spaces, because even in anonymous spaces, we're going to start projecting XYZ onto them. And I think part of the issue with, like, the school apps is that, like, it's not anonymous. Like, everyone is anonymously allowed to post about things, but they're posting about things that everybody knows about and can pin a face to. As opposed to the wider internet, which is just kind of like, yeah, dude, we are all here talking about, I don't know, Supernatural. Again, check off a box on the Wow of True bingo board.
Did it ever feel like a positive thing or like a relief for people to not know your identity? Or was it more like, is it that people were just not thinking about your racial identity at all? Or was it people being like, you must be white because that is what we consider the default, even though that's bullshit?
A little bit of both. I mean, I think it's more just that, like, I was really used to, like, my first impression, like, my people's first impression of me being that I'm Asian because I look the way I do because I'm Asian. I don't know how else to say that. I'm ethnically from Korea. But, like, unless you say certain aspects of yourself on the internet, then they're just never going to come across, which is kind of, like... So it made me feel like if I was talking about Asian stuff, I had to put a disclaimer, or that I should, which sometimes I did, but sometimes I didn't. But it was, like... I mean, I think that was, like, a very small part of the rest of my online experience, but it was kind of like, wow, I haven't felt this way since I moved here when I was 11.
That's wild.
Yeah, I mean, like, you know, you lived in Laos. It's, like, weird going from being, like, you're Jewish, but you look white. You know what I mean? Like, so it's weird going from, like, and then if you move to Laos, damn, there's sure a lot of Lao people there. You know, like, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Imagine that, but, like, you move to New Jersey.
Yeah, I think that is something very interesting about Jewish identity is people don't often know you're Jewish until you say you're Jewish. And that is a privilege. And it's also something that you have to reckon with. Like, if someone hates Jews and I walk by them on the street, they're not going to, like, yell at me, because I think there are some ways in which people might think I look Jewish, like if they know what to look for, but also like you can look like anything and be Jewish because it's a religion.
I don't know how this goes back to anonymity, but I think, I mean, I guess the more that we're talking about this today, the more that I feel like being anonymous on the internet is just like a larger reflection of the way that we want to control people's perception of us in the real world. Ah, shit, the internet relates to real life. Wow, that's almost like that's the thesis for our podcast.
And I mean, even with, like, Jewish identity in particular, like, I think about this with, like, why do I have a Jewish star in my bio? And to me, it's just kind of like, it's almost like a fuck you more than it is like a expression of my identity, which is kind of sad that expressing my identity is a fuck you. But I think that, like, particularly after Trump was elected, I think I and a lot of, like, Reform Jews that didn't grow up, like, extra religious, like, I grew up more culturally Jewish than, like, we are observing Shabbat and being religious. I think a lot of Jews had this kind of realization of, like, oh, we are not as safe and accepted as maybe it seemed, especially for me growing up in Boca Raton, Florida, an extremely Jewish place. And then I think it's sort of an act of resistance in a way to be, like, visibly Jewish. But also, I mean, that is a privilege in itself, and it's something that I can turn on or off depending on the context I'm in, and that is not something that people from other minority groups can do.
Yeah, I don't know. I have, like, there's a lot of shit about myself that I just don't post on the internet because I don't think it's anyone's business as parts of my identity. But, like, it's interesting specifically with being able to say I'm Asian or not saying I'm Asian, because I can't do that in real life. I can't do that with my public identity, but I can do that with my anonymous account. And I don't know if it's, like, a good thing or a bad thing. It's just a thing.
Yes, I've been thinking a lot about this question of, is anonymity good or bad? Because I'm seeing so much legislation, like, picking up steam that has a lot of pressure to pass because people want the internet to be safer for kids. But a lot of the time, this legislation isn't very thought through in how it has impacts on digital privacy. Even things like end-to-end encryption could be challenged, which, like, end-to-end encryption is the thing that solves the problem of help. Everybody on Yik Yak actually is not as anonymous as they think they are. That's why so much political organizing happens on Signal, because it is end-to-end encrypted. And that means that if Signal gets subpoenaed, they don't have your messages. So, like, there's a defense there for certain, like, political activity. But also, of course, there's then the danger of, like, are people doing crime on Signal? Probably. But yeah, so I'm kind of obsessed with this question of how do you keep the internet safe for children while also preserving our right to be anonymous and the, like, human rights benefits of anonymity, as well as just the, like, formative elements of, honestly, my life probably is better because I was on Tumblr in high school, which is crazy to say, but I do think that in a time when I felt very alone, it made me feel a lot less alone to just kind of, like, be a music nerd on the internet talking to people about Arctic Monkeys. And also, I think I probably wouldn't have the job I do if I didn't spend so much time being very online in high school because I had so few friends. So thank you to my high school for making me feel isolated so that I can now be an internet journalist.
Hey, okay, pivoting here, maybe the problem is schools and not anonymous social media. What if we just abolish the school system in colleges? Does this fix things, but we keep the anonymous social media?
Then again, you are a weirdo who has, like, a solid group of friends from high school that you talk to regularly and who I now know because we've been on an island together. Yes. Because we went on vacation to an island, which is a thing that happened. And if you're a new listener, go back.
You should go listen to the island episodes.
Yeah, there's some weird lore of, you know...
The island.
The island.
The island. Yeah. I don't know. Like,
it's like Lost.
Kind of a weird case because I was very much... I had a pretty good social life. Like, I actually enjoyed being a teenager. I'm sorry. I like it was actually pretty okay for me. And yet I still ended up in the cold embrace of the anonymous social media accounts because I really wanted to talk about fandom stuff that my friends in real life did not want to talk about.
Yeah, it's so funny because I feel like for me, something I've noticed about myself is that when there's a big change in my life, I freak out. And then every time, even though I know this is going to happen, I'm still like, oh, but this time is different. Like, I don't know, like when I moved to Laos, I freaked out. But the point being that I hated high school so much that when I moved into college, I didn't feel that at all. I was like, I'm fine. I'm doing great. Like, let's go. Like, I had no anxiety about, like, oh no, I'm away from home for the first time. Like my life is drastically changing in so many ways. I was just like, all right, let's fucking go. Let's do this. We're out of high school.
I cried when I moved into my dorm room, dude. This is because I had a normal high school experience. I don't think we've come to a conclusion on whether any of this is good or bad. I have come to a conclusion on, I do think your book report was good, and I think it was well reported, and I learned too much about what the teenagers are doing.
Thank you.
And now I feel really old.
No, I think you're right in that I tried to construct this narrative about, like, anonymity and how that is happening in high school and college, and instead we just realized that school is bad, and that's the moral of the episode.
Hey, we don't have any sign-off anymore. This is weird. How do we leave? How do we get out of the episode?
Quick, look, there's a door.
Thank you for listening. Bye.
Bye.